morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the Blowback Roundtable. I have a couple great guests with us, and our usual co-hosts aren't with us today. Ben hopefully may pop by a little bit later, but I've got Jeff Brown from Normandy, France, and Leo Zhou is in Berlin, Germany. Jeff, could I trouble you to tell me a little bit about yourself so our viewers know where you live and what about your work and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm a French-American dual citizen. I live in Normandy, in Cherbourg. I worked in China for 16 years, and it's my second home. I read, speak, and write the language. I wrote the China trilogy. I am the founder of the Seek Truth from Facts Foundation. I have China Rising Radio Sinoland as my platform, my website, and I also have another website called China Tech Newsflash, and I'm also a co-founder and the curator of the Bioweapon Truth Commission, and I'm really happy to be on the show with Leo tonight because he's a great friend and a comrade, and it's a pleasure to be with him tonight. So, thank you.
So it's an honor for me, Jeff, to have you on. I became familiar with your work 5 years ago, or maybe even more than that. But your book about China is communist, damn it, that was great and eye-opening. When I was having my political awakening, less than a decade ago, trying to figure things out. There's so many narratives about China, and it's hard to figure out truth from facts, kind of like your other project. And but I think if somebody is genuinely honestly interested, they can get to the bottom of things despite all these false narratives. But you and Godfrey Roberts and a lot of the members of the China's Writers Group were very helpful in helping me to discern truth from facts. So it's an honor for me to have you on the program. Thank you very much. Leo, it's also an honor, but you're always here. So I'm not gushing as much about you, but no, thank you guys both very much for coming on.
Oh, you should gush.
I should.
No, very nice to be here. Thank you.
So this is just very interesting times. Like the times that we're living in right now are historic and momentous. You can't overstate that enough. Where do we want to begin? So I like to begin with the title of my program. The title of our program today is Genocide, Myth and Reality. There's a real, actual, legitimate genocide going on right now before our eyes. And yet the West is not only just silent about it, but it's supporting it. It's enabling it. And then not long ago, there was a fake genocide that everybody wanted to, everybody in the West wanted to promote and get everybody agitated about and riled up about. And it wasn't even an actual genocide. So how can we understand that? How can we, rationalize these two different narratives and what's going on? Leo?
Well, I would just like to ask all of the liberals who buy into the fabricated genocide in Xin Jiang, China, for which all of the Muslim majority countries have applauded, have denied. All of the Muslim majority countries in the world have applauded China's response and solution to the very real problem of jihadist, separatist, fundamentalist terrorism in China. But I would just like to ask all of the liberals who are pro-Palestine, right? Because this issue has been very well exposed in the West, and a lot of information has come out over the years due to the hard work of Palestinian activists and many other things, and also just the fact that it's been going on for 75 years. So Western leftists and progressives know more about Palestine, and there's a big, significant faction that is pro-Palestine, right? But most of whom buy into the fabricated, fake genocide in Xinjiang, right? I would just like to ask all of these people and some of my friends and former friends, you know, how they make sense of all of the Western states absolutely supporting 100%, using the same language as they do Ukraine, all the way, whatever it takes, we will support Israel, right? Supporting this literal genocide, gruesome, brutal, thousands of people killed a day, injured and killed a day right now. How do they square that with the Western states supporting a full-on genocide in front of the eyes of the world, the cameras of the world, and the rivers of tears that they cry for Muslims in Xinjiang, right? I mean, it's literally not, no amount of mental gymnastics can square that. It's literally these same states cry for Muslims in Xinjiang, and they at the same time support the genocide of Muslims in Palestine.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it. And you know what? We should have invited a liberal here, but we don't have one. But that's the problem. That's the problem with liberals, and it's the hypocrisy of Western imperialism.
I'd like to
It's
just
ideology.
I would just like to say that, you know, this whole Xinjiang thing, the CIA with George Soros created the East Turkmenistan, you know, free republic. It's supposed to with a baby with a sky blue flag and everything, and of course they've got offices in Washington and London and Paris and Berlin, and they get millions of dollars in NGO money. And one of their, and they have a flag and the website, and one of their quote representatives went to New York and at the UN, and in the empty assembly hall of the UN, it could have been at 2:00 in the morning for all I know, gave this speech claiming that at that point, I think they were saying 200,000 or 300,000 Xinjiang people were living in gulags, blah, 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 blah. That was taken. Of course, it got registered in, unfortunately, all that gets registered in the United Nations logbook, you know, as an official speech. The next day, of course, the lockstep brown shirt, jackbooted Western media took it, and everywhere, thousands of outlets around the world simultaneously. And it wasn't before long, you know, just blasting out genocide, you know, gulags in Xinjiang. That's how the West works. By the time they got finished, you know, it had been inflated to 2 million. And as Leo pointed out, every majority Muslim country has visited Xinjiang and loves what China's doing. There's 25,000 mosques in China. There are like 25,000 total. I don't know how many there are, but most of them are in Xinjiang, about 20,000. There's six of them in Shenzhen, which is about as far away as you can get from Xinjiang. You can go to my wife and I lived 200 and 300 meters from a mosque in Beijing. If you're a Muslim, you can pray. So anyway, I actually haven't published it yet, but a guy from the U.S. consulate last year was having a trade meeting. He was in the commercial, the trade portfolio. And one of the American businessmen raised his hand and made a complaint about the fact that they had banned cotton from Xinjiang, because he was obviously in the clothing business or the textile business, and he was not happy. Well, this guy, with his Chinese employee from the consulate, U.S. consulate in Guangzhou, was caught saying in front of everybody, "Listen, we know it's not true what's going on, and this is not really going on in Xinjiang. We know it's not true, but we need to use this. We need to use this to put pressure on the Chinese government, for regime change." And he actually said that in this group, in this commercial meeting. On WikiLeaks, there are cables from the U.S. Embassy in Beijing back to Washington, clearly stating it's a lie. It's a lie. They know it's a lie. So everybody knows it's a lie, but don't tell that to CNN and BBC and the Washington Post and what I call the big lie propaganda machine. It's not the truth that matters. It's to destroy the communist socialist way of life of the Chinese people. That's the goal. Nothing else matters.
So it's interesting how they used the pretext of this UN speech, and that gave a license for all the Western media, the whole apparatus, to shift into gear and start proliferating this narrative. And that's exactly how it works. And it works, you can look at any number of false narratives that the media just runs with, and there's a new one every day, it seems.
Yeah, facts don't matter. It's about emotion, right? It's about a feeling that they create among Western populations to be against China, to have an emotional response to communism, to socialism, and to China. The facts are very easily verifiable. Everything that we are saying, Google. Anyone who has Google can Google how many mosques are in China and in Xinjiang, thousands and thousands. Anyone with Google can see, new Uyghur fashion designers, right? That just made a big splash in the fashion industry in Asia, right? There are these like amazing photos of brand new, or not brand new, but like new stars in the fashion business. The runway shows in Xinjiang. There's the thriving pop music, electronic dance music culture in Xinjiang, right? There's like new pop music coming out of Xinjiang that sounds like a Turkish Chinese version of Depeche Mode. Some of the songs. It is really good music. I'm a DJ myself. I play some of it in my sets, and I have some of it uploaded on my SoundCloud. But it's just, remember the amazing Jewish pop music industry in 1930s Germany? It doesn't exist. I'm making a facetious, sarcastic joke. People that are so oppressed that they are making next level 21st century hyper modern traditional dance music. It's just ludicrous. And tourism has bloomed in the recent 5 years. Something like 2 million people, I don't remember the numbers, visit Xinjiang every year. And so the facts are out there. There's hundreds, thousands of videos on YouTube. People are uploading them. YouTube can delete them because many of the Xinjiang accounts have been deleted by YouTube of Xinjiang Uyghur residents showing what their daily life is, and just deleted by YouTube. But there are still hundreds, thousands of videos of people celebrating Muslim holidays, dancing in the streets. Just pure good vibes, right? Just like hundreds of people dancing to their traditional music in the streets, smiles everywhere, right? Now, imagine like the mood of this in the streets of a place where people are oppressed, systematically oppressed, right? Never mind concentration camps and genocide. Like, let's just say, like, people are systematically oppressed. What would the streets feel like?
You must be talking about Europe and the United States.
Detroit.
Yeah,
Like,
Detroit.
it would feel like Detroit. Like, desolate and just sorrow and loneliness, and the streets would be just, I mean, but watch these videos from Xinjiang. There are hundreds, thousands of them.
So what was going on? We already mentioned earlier that there was a separatist group that was being funded by the U.S. and supported, and they had an ideology. They had one of these ISIS-like intolerant Wahhabist, non-Muslim. I mean, they called themselves Muslims, but it's a perversion of Islam, and this was the ideology that the U.S. was promoting and funding. Now, I've heard that, Uyghur Muslims have been practicing winemaking in China for 1,000 years. And this new strain of ISIS-like Muslims was chopping the hands off of Muslim winemakers because, they didn't appreciate, them brewing alcohol or making wine. So it's not like these separatists had broad-based support in the province of Xinjiang. How do you say that?
Xinjiang.
Xinjiang.
Xinjiang. Thank you.
Xinjiang.
Xinjiang.
Yeah, much better. Oh, well, very good. All right.
So this movement that the U.S. was promoting was engaging in legitimate acts of terror, and there was many big, huge terrorist actions that resulted in, hundreds of deaths. So during the Olympics,
my wife and I were living there when it happened. That we were living there in 2010, 2012, during that period when these black they were training them in Iraq and Afghanistan and Afghanistan and other countries. And that is no man's land out there. I mean, there's no way you can guard the border. I mean, there's the Tarim Basin, and there's mountains, there's mountain ranges, and even Afghanistan physically connects with China at the Khyber Pass. So it's impossible to guard the Chinese border. And so and these people were coming in. There was we had Kunming. Yeah, I remember we were one in Kunming where they were black suits and turbans and stabbing people with knives and swords. Well, once China at that point, I even wrote about this. They realized that all that Saudi money, all that Wahhabi money pouring into all these thousands of mosques in China was poison, and that they were being infected with Wahhabist, extremist Muslim ideology, and it's not just Muslims. There's Catholic extremists. I mean, it's not just, and obviously Jewish extremists too. And so anyway, they went in and they got into all the mosques, got rid of all the ideology out of all the mosques, and realizing that they really couldn't guard the border that well, they decided to internally make the people reject, because for those people to have gotten to Kunming, they had to have help internally. They didn't just get on they had to have help. And so the Chinese government decided to really push, nationalism, patriotism, civilizational behavior, etc. Massive campaigns. And that's what they were using, these photographs of people in a classroom who were learning about civilizational, China, etc. and using those photos to say they were in prison camps. Well, I can't remember when the last one was. Kunming was one of the last big ones in, I think, 2012 or 2013 or something like that. How many internal terrorist attacks has China, Muslim inspired, and well, actually any, other than some disgruntled parents and stuff, that does happen where a guy goes off and stabs some kids at a school and stuff, but that's more mental illness than anything else. But in terms of organized Muslim terrorist acts in China since 2013, how many has China, with 1.5 billion people, and is as big as Canada and the United States? How many attacks have they had?
More than 2,000. Oh,
No.
since then. You mean since then?
Yeah, zero. And
yes,
you don't think the Uyghurs don't like what is going on? Do you think they liked all those attacks and all that crap? The Uyghurs are loving it. I mean,
yes,
they're getting rich. Their annual growth rate's like 10% a year.
Yeah.
So
all these videos of how developed and rich Xinjiang has become, how prosperous. I mean, according to the UN and according to Human Rights Watch, there has been no abnormal influx of refugees from China to any of the surrounding 5 Muslim majority countries that border Xinjiang, right? It's a bus ride away. You were talking about there's no way to patrol the borders. It also goes the other way, right? Like if Uyghurs wanted to escape China, they can very easily just take a bus.
Walk across the border.
Exactly. There are 5 Muslim majority countries that border Xinjiang. And since the 90s up until the educational and economic development program, which eradicated the problem, there were more than 2,000 terrorist attacks in China from these CIA and NED ultimately funded extremists. And I have to point out, one of the educational programs of the Communist Party in eradicating this problem was to read the Quran, was to teach the Quran to people who are infected with Wahhabism and extremist Islam, to show them, like, no, what you believe in is a sick, perverted version. That's not Islam. So reading of the Quran was part of the educational program that China implemented.
So we know that. Go ahead.
I just want to point out that before they started this massive campaign in Xinjiang and there's nothing wrong. I mean, if you want to call it re-education, fine. I mean, that has Orwellian overtones for Westerners, but the people needed to be re-educated. They needed to go back to school, like Leo's talking about. And before these terrorists would infiltrate, across, through the mountains and everything. Well, there were enough sympathizers in country, who would listen to their crap, that could get them to cities like Beijing and Kunming and Guangzhou and other places like that. Now, if those guys try to come across, they can't get a football field further inside China, because the Xinjiang people are going to go, "Hey, here they are!
So it's
come and get them!"
A successful response to this legitimate problem. If the U.S. was going to be consistent with how they're dealing with Israel, they would have declared openly, China has a right to defend itself, and we're going to ship all kinds of arms to China so they can carpet bomb the province. Like, that would have been consistent from the West. But instead of doing that, they want to pretend that this tremendous response, the correct response to that kind of a thing, which is really to flood the province with opportunity and prosperity and flood it, with development and money for industries and to create jobs, to educate the people, teach them a trade, like that's the best response you could possibly do, win hearts and minds. And that's what they did. But the U.S. claims that's a genocide. Meanwhile, Israel has a right to defend itself. And we're gonna hand them all the bombs they need to carpet bomb Gaza. It's so evil.
Especially with the Belt and Road Initiative. Now Xin Jiang, between East China, coastal China, and the rest of Asia, Russia, and all points beyond, all the way to Europe. Xin Jiang is now just, throbbing with economic activity because it has become a nexus. It's become a nexus for all the railroads and and other electrical, high power lines, telecommunications, everything, spanning across Asia. So I'm going to go back. My next trip, maybe not my next trip, but my trip after. I've been to Xinjiang, and I want to go back and do and maybe spend a month there and do a report. So I will go.
Please come back on our program and share what you saw. So that's exactly right. Their future, right now, the efforts of development and bringing prosperity have been tremendously successful. They've won hearts and minds, but this is only the beginning. Because of their location, their geographic location, right at the beginning of this Belt and Road going all over the planet, the future is super bright. So, good for the people of that province. And again, that's the proper way to deal with these kinds of problems. And the U.S. and Israel. What if Israel would have just flooded Gaza with development and aid? Do you think there would be people trying to break out of that concentration camp and kill Israelis? I don't think so.
No, and I just want to point out also the same thing with Tibet and the same thing with Mongolia. Something like 90% of Tibetans speak Tibetan language and can read and write Tibetan language, and it is taught in the schools. By contrast, how many Cherokee in the U.S. Speak their original language? And also, just zoom out. This has always been the socialist way of doing things, right? Giving people, ethnic minorities, not only autonomy and sovereignty, giving them, self-determination, education, economic development. I'm talking about the Soviet Union. In all of the ethnic minorities under the Soviet Union enjoyed massive economic development, right? Completely opposite of the policies of the Tsarist regime in Russia before the communist revolution. Completely overturned that. The Soviet state funded the creation of alphabets for many of the ethnic minority languages in
China too.
China as well. Massive funding for revival of and protection of ethnic minority cultures. This is consistent with all of the socialist countries, and the West has always told lies about socialist countries and how they, right now in Berlin, it's absolutely sick. I personally know people, in particular, Boryat, one Boryat who's a successful artist, and he's invited to Germany, and he lives here now, and he's given grants to produce shows about the colonization of his people by the Soviet Union, by Russia. It is absolutely disgusting. And this guy, he gets a lot of love and a lot of money for doing this stuff, and he's just like, I'm like, okay, right here on Wikipedia, it even says that your language, the Boryat language, the script was funded by the Soviet Union. So how is that cultural genocide? Like, I don't, how? And he has no answer. He just said, well, maybe they funded our language, but, they oppress us. And
I do want to point out that, go ahead, Leo, if you want to finish.
no, go ahead.
I do want to point out that I call the Chinese government Baba Beijing because it's paternalistic, it's Confucius and very paternalistic. So Baba Beijing, when the CIA rigged, the attack in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, in March of 2008, as a way to try to trigger a massive boycotting of the games. And it was so patently done by the CIA. It was so obviously done by the CIA. It didn't work. Of course, the 2008 Olympics will go down in history as in Beijing, will go down in Summer Olympics. Will go down in history as one of the greatest Olympic events ever. But that they realized at that point that their policy of promoting Tibetan language at the expense of Chinese was a mistake. And I mean, it was just all Tibetan. There was very, very little Chinese after grade school. And so they realized Tibet was coming in online, high-speed trains were coming in, and airports were being built, and Tibet was becoming another, Xin Jiang. But these poor Tibetans couldn't find jobs because they couldn't speak Mandarin properly and read and write Mandarin properly. So that socialist ideal about preserving minority cultures is just as big in China as Leo's talked about in the Soviet Union. And I've written about it in my books. They're spoiled rotten. They get anything they want. Whatever they ask for, they get. Because the Chinese government wants them to be happy. They're spoiled. And
those policies make Western affirmative action pale in comparison.
Yeah. And so let me just go ahead and finish. So then they went on to a massive Learn Chinese campaign, and the adults who had already gotten out of school. And in the last 10 years, they've done a remarkable job. Now the curriculum is more balanced. They speak, read, and write Tibetan perfectly, but now they also speak, read, and write Chinese perfectly. And so that, I just want to point that out. And now because of that, Tibetans are, joining corporations and businesses and, all over China, all over China. Now they're now being able to go outside of Tibet and get jobs around the country, work for China, work for companies, so because now they speak, read, and write Chinese. So anyway, I just want to make that comment.
There's 1.4, 1.5 billion people in China. 92% of them are the Han majority. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like 38-ish recognized.
55.
Okay. 55 recognized ethnic minorities, and they get special treatment, like you guys are saying, which is, within socialism, there's a long history of that, from Lenin, protecting and promoting these individual cultures and celebrating them, under the umbrella of socialism. And that's just patently different from the West's approach. So the West sees these differences as ways to divide societies, to weaken societies, and to further their imperialist interests. And that's just the card they play over and over and over again everywhere. Western imperialism has sought to further its interests.
Oh, so, just mention Native Americans, Aborigines in Australia. I mean, it's been total.
They weren't
genocide.
Treated so well.
Understatement of the century. Yeah.
So we've got some clips we can play and discuss. I know Leo thought this Norman Finkelstein clip was interesting. I found one from Glenn Greenwald about
He's quite a guy.
some Zionists in New York just expressing, some really Nazi-like, thoughts. Should we try and see if we can?
That's because Zionism is fascism. I mean, there's no difference.
Yeah, we can talk about the roots of Zionism and also of the Jewish state a little bit, and also of the Hebrew language, and also in terms of ethnicity, like the construction, the arbitrary, totally cynical construction of the Jewish identity that is absolutely integral to the colonial fascist project. But we can deal with that a little bit. But if you want to play those clips, play yours first, and then the Norman Finkelstein if you want to play them.
Fuck Palestine! Palestine to my dick!
What do you think the response should be from Netanyahu and the military to Gaza?
Kill all Palestinians! All of them! Not one left from the river to the sea. Palestine will be deceased! And Israel need to do like this. You see? Now Gaza. Like this. Gaza need to do like this. Or like this, but all this Jewish. Two options.
What do you think the response should be to Gaza?
We gotta wipe them off the fucking map. I'm talking about every fucking flatten them like a parking lot.
Yeah,
Flatten them out once and
there's
for all. Get rid of that.
nothing else you can do. They proved to us that there's nothing else you can do. We tried, and
We tried everything. It doesn't work.
You get the gist. Is that true? Did Israel just try everything? Did they just bend over backwards? Is that true?
Well, I'd like to point out that this genocide, I mean, people are, it's popular to talk about, 1948 when the United States and Britain forced the creation of Israel on the world. But it really, really goes back to 1917 to the Balfour Declaration. And that was basically when the Rothschilds, which is the Jewish banking family that controls non-socialist, communist global banking, signed with the United States and with Britain, declared that there will be a Jewish state created in in Palestine. Immediately, money started in 1917.
Yeah.
Money started flowing in. Jews started pouring in. They have been stealing, raping, exterminating Palestinians, not since the 67 war, not since 1948. 106 years this genocide has been going on. So we've really tried everything. I mean, they have, and of course this, and I'm sure Leo knows a lot more than I do about it, but it just goes, the Jewish Torah, which is basically the Old Testament, approves all this. We are not, the three of us are not even, we're subhuman. We're subhumans. We don't deserve to live because we're not Jewish. So the Jewish holy book, the Torah, sanctions stealing, piracy, rape, plunder, genocide, extermination. It's all perfectly legal in order to preserve the Jewish people. So I have no sympathy for the Jewish. I have no sympathy for Israel. I have no sympathy for and I keep seeing this. Well, remember not all Jewish people are Zionists. Well, tell that to the poor Palestinians who are being slaughtered like dogs. Do they really care? Anyway,
Yeah,
Leo.
for sure. Average citizens of Israel are complicit to an extent, but we should make a distinction between the Jewish religion and Zionism, a very big difference, because those extremely ethnocentric and violent passages exist not only in the Old Testament of the Jewish religion, but also in Christianity and also in Islam as well, right? These Abrahamic religions all come from a time 2000 roughly years ago, or Islam is younger, but they all contain passages like this, as well as very humanist and very communal sort of ideas in them. But the Jewish religion being the oldest, right? The historical development is such that it was perhaps the most patriarchal and the most extreme in some of these aspects. But again, I think we should definitely make a distinction between Zionism and the Jewish religion. I think this is very important because Zionism is entirely a fabrication. It's entirely a construct of the colonial powers. It's from its inception. I'm not an expert by any means. I've only recently started researching and studying these things. But the Hebrew language was consciously, deliberately created very, very recently in the 20th century, using Yiddish, some aspects of the old language, but combined with other things. And it's the thing itself. The language is sort of a very modern construct. And we have to bring in a little bit of ethnicity. I don't want to go too deep into it, but what we think of as Jewish people, as an ethnicity, doesn't exist. It is a religion, it is a culture, right? If you want to talk about Semitic peoples, right, the people living in Israel are not Semitic, like the vast majority of them. They are Europeans. They have European blood. They have European ethnicity that were moved there. And they are the upper crust, right? They are all the landowners are all, they look white. And the more brown, the darker skinned Jewish people from Ethiopia, from
North Africa,
from everywhere, are run the shops. They have small businesses, and the ones from Africa tend to be service sector workers. It is absolutely a racist state within Israel. And of course, the Palestinians are the lowest and have none of the rights that Jewish Israelis enjoy. So from its inception, please, I would encourage all of the viewers to research into the creation of the Hebrew language, and also the wholly arbitrary ethnic category that is Jewish, that has been created in a very cynical way. Now, also, just to expand on the Zionist entity and its history, right? I was listening to Ben Norton, a very good program very recently about Israel's footprints all over South America since its inception in the 50s, I think, or late 40s was it? But they have been funding, arming, and training paramilitary right-wing death squads all over South America. Israel, the IDF, has been training these paramilitary with funding from the CIA to exterminate indigenous people in South America, in Guatemala, in Honduras, in Colombia, all over, in Chile, all over South America, exterminating indigenous people, burning down thousands of villages of indigenous people, massacring, mass murdering leftists by the tens, hundreds of thousands for decades and decades, right? And of course, in Africa as well, the IDF has been doing these kinds of activities all over the world, and from every angle that we look at, Zionism itself, it's not just like Wahhabism is a perversion of the Quran. Zionism is a sick, anti-Jewish ideology. It is a fascist colonial entity from its inception, and it is nothing but.
So I've written a few things on Facebook, and to your point, Leo, Zionism began around the turn of the century between the 1800s and 1900s. And, Theodor Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland in 1896. But it was predicated on this pseudo-scientific understanding of race. And it was predicated on this false understanding that Jews are a race that have these intractable genetic differences from non-Jews, and they can't assimilate. And efforts to assimilate Jews with non-Jews are always going to end in Jewish suffering and Jewish people, being oppressed by their Gentile neighbors. So the solution to that was to make their own state. Unfortunately, they wanted to make their own state in a region that was 95% non-Jewish. So from the very beginning, Zionism was not going to accomplish anything without terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft. So terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft are inherent to Zionism, not Judaism, to Zionism. But
before they, the British, mostly the British, carved out a piece of Palestine to establish Israel. There were at least two prior attempts or ideas, plans to establish a Zionist state in other parts of the world. I'm pretty sure the first one was Uganda. There was an attempt to establish a Zionist state in Uganda, and then in the 1930s, before the war broke out, before the World War II broke out, there was a pact. This I just learned about recently. There was a pact, a plan that didn't go through, but there was a plan between the Japanese colonizers and the Zionists called the Pufferfish Plan. And it was that the Japanese, the idea was that after Japanese successfully colonizes all of China, that they would give the Zionists a piece of China in what is today Manchuria, or what it was called Manchuria, to establish a Zionist state. So this idea didn't go through, but those were some previous attempts to establish this fascist colonial tool of the
also,
Western powers.
Madagascar was looked at. To play a little bit of the devil's advocate, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't get it, but I met another China Writers Group member, Amir Khan, who's a professor at Hunan University in Changsha, China. We spent a few days together and traveled around together, and he mentioned a book, and I should have written it down. He said this book really was amazing. I think it was a Canadian writer. And it was a history of the Jewish people going back to 2000 BC or 15. Well, Abraham supposedly lived about 1500 BC. So it was basically a history of the Jewish people. Of course, Abraham left Mesopotamia after a civilizational collapse there, wandered around the desert in his sheepskin and his camel skin tent, and finally, landed in Palestine, etc. But he and Amir's, and I'm really sorry, I can't give it to you tonight. And I asked him for it. We've had email problems, and anyway, now I'm kicking myself for not getting it. But he said that this guy points out that in order to survive, the Jews have always been a tiny minority. I mean, they're only 2.4 or 1.8% of the American people. So they've always been a minority. Everywhere they've been, they've always been a tiny minority. And he pointed out and just showed case after case after case that the Jewish people learned how to survive by pitting the majority people against each other, fomenting discontent, between the bigger groups, so that they would ignore them and not do anything against them. And anyway, so I do want to try to get the book and read it, but creating wars outside of them and let everybody else slaughter each other so that they could survive has been a survival tool for the Jewish people, for thousands of years. And I'm sorry I don't have the name of the book, but I'll try to get it and send it to you.
And just to continue that train of thought, the Jewish cultural category of Jewish people have been repeatedly victimized in since Rome or even before Rome, right? And it is true that they were forbidden to take other jobs, to own businesses and to have other jobs other than banking. And that is one of the reasons, that is the primary reason why a lot of Jewish people in Europe did go into money lending, because they were discriminated against. And this fact fed into the Nazi racist idea of Jewish bankers, and they control the world, which still persists today. I mean, there's an element of truth in that, but it doesn't mean what the fascists mean, right? And there is a larger point here that anti-Semitism, of course, does exist. Anti-Jewish racism, of course, has been a major force in Europe through the centuries. And with the establishment of capitalism, right, a lot of social dissonances, conflicts, and contradictions arose. People were unhappy. People were broken up from their families. People were exploited brutally since the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s. And all of the contradictions of capitalism that has victimized people were blamed on the Jews. This is, I think, the central point, that why anti-Semitism is a little bit different, or a lot different, from other kinds of racism, in that all of the emerging contradictions of capitalism was blamed solely on the Jews, scapegoated on the people that were more or less forced into banking professions. And they were successful. They're smart people. So I just wanted to point out the origin of this idea that Jews control the world and they control the banks and all of these ideas.
That they've caused all the wars. That's kind of what, Hitler accused communism of being a Jewish plot for global domination. And so, yeah, there's, it's a complex
sickening. It's complex, but it's absolutely sickening, and especially with what we were talking about earlier. The establishment, the construction of the Jewish racial identity, which is wholly arbitrary, right? And the creation of the modern Hebrew language, and the establishment of the Zionist state. And I mean, knowing all of this, right, just makes this, Jews control the world idea even more stupid. It's just completely ludicrous.
So I guess before then, the Torah must have been in Latin and Greek. It must have been, if it wasn't in Hebrew, it had to have been in Latin or Greek.
No, I mean, Yiddish existed.
Okay. I'm talking about 2,000 years ago.
Yeah,
I guess the Torah had to have been either in Greek or Latin, because that's what the Bible was in.
Yeah, probably.
So,
I mean, back then there was, in 2,000 years ago, there was no distinction between Christians and Jews except for religion.
Mm-hmm.
They're all Semitic peoples. They're all Semitic peoples in that region of the world.
Ben, thank you for joining us.
Hey, sorry I'm late, guys. I just wanted to hear it out. I didn't want to interrupt a really interesting conversation. Hey, guys. Jeff, first I want to congratulate you not just on the great book, but the foreword from one of my personal heroes, I think, Andrei Blicek, for getting that.
Oh, yeah. One of my good friends, great friends. Rest in peace.
Oh, absolute role model for me, that guy. But I thought this was interesting.
Where do you live, Ben? I'm just curious.
I'm in Hungary, where this trope is used all the time with George Soros, who is an actually hugely damaging person, but everybody in Hungary thinks that's anti-Semitism from the Orban government, because we don't like Soros. So it's been used all the time. What I found interesting is, yes, anti-Semitism, they poisoned the wells and all that. That predates capitalism. That came from the Western European nation states. And it was all, even during feudalism, they had to get, sort of the modern artisanal service jobs in the cities, I guess, the urban centers. They weren't laboring out in the fields. And a lot of that, which, existed from just the average working people, for them, that envy, that already got weaponized before it actually took off, and took the world into one empire or the other. But yeah, very interesting, very ancient. Not sure I contributed much so far, but I'm really interested on where this is going. And
so the official narrative is that Israel, and it depends on if you're doing the official Christian narrative that believes that Israel is fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and they believe that the Jews are a people. And they will argue that they're genetically linked. They are the genetic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, that just falls apart, right? Because you have Ethiopian Jews, you have Persian Jews, you have Iraqi Jews, you have Eastern European Jews. It's ridiculous to propose that all these people have a genetic link to Abraham that's stronger than, say, the genetic link the average member of Hamas has to Abraham. So Shlomo Sand, in his book, The Invention of the Jewish People, he asserts that, the average member of Hamas has a closer genetic linkage to Abraham than do any of these white European settlers that came over, during the last 100 years. But the other thing would be the religion, right? Well, okay, you're Jew because you identify with the religion of Judaism. But the problem is the vast majority of people in Israel aren't religious. They don't adhere to any, they're not Jewish in the religious sense. They claim a cultural heritage, but they're not, believing religious Jews. So yeah, it's these things are if you have the time to research the official narrative, it becomes obvious, doesn't hold any water. And if you think about it deeply enough, you realize that Israel ought not deserve our support for their terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft that continues and has gone on for the last 100 years.
Has to be said.
But a lot of people are, too busy, and they just kind of passively absorb the Western indoctrination that we're all subjected to. So
a big problem is, although I will say I'm surprised about how much pro-Palestinian expression is percolating in the media. But the big problem is the big lie propaganda machine. I mean, they said there was a UEFA, the European football.
Oh yeah,
the European Football Association is telling people you can't fly Palestinian flags in any of the stadiums, in Europe. Well, they're doing it.
Oh, Celtic, which is a Scottish one. They just dressed everything up. The latest I've seen was an Irish team. And that's the thing, that this is in the West. What is called the Global South is automatically with Palestine because they know the boots, everywhere. But even in the West, I mean, I monitored it last week and I got to about 24 cities in the collective West where there were these mass protests. I mean, things have changed.
For Palestine. Pro-Palestine. I have to point out, even within Israel, there are a lot of pro-Palestine voices, right? There are a lot of good Israelis who recognize the injustice that has gone on for 75 years, right? There's a diversity of opinion within even Israeli media. There's a lot of criticism of the administration, and they're continuing.
Oh yeah, and they want Netanyahu rightly.
Yeah, policy of the apartheid regime. I mean, they're actually they're not. Many of them have been suppressed, but actually, even today in Israeli media, there's some dissenting voices. There's a diversity of opinion. Compare that to Europe. Compare that to Germany. Like, any dissent is just completely suppressed. They just last week they arrested Jewish pro-Palestinian demonstrators here in Germany. It's absolutely insane.
Let me add to that point, and it also kind of talks about what Jeff was saying about, Judaism in the Torah. And I think Leo gets it right in that, the Zionism is a perversion of Judaism. And, there's a way to interpret, the Torah in a way that, makes it okay for Jews to do unto others before they do unto them, but there's also, the Orthodox Jews. There's a lot of Orthodox Jews in New York City, for instance, and they're pro-Iran, they're anti-Zionist. So there's a good, religion is like, it's like,
you can do that with any holy book, can't you?
What's that?
You can do that with any holy book. You can use it
exactly. So it's very malleable, and it depends on what your interests are, and what kind of a person you are. That's the kind of religion you're going to get from your holy book. But I wanna get the best from the holy books, and so I denounce Zionism and interpretations of holy books that are bad for humanity.
When I talk to people about the Old Testament and all the, I mean,
genocide.
in my opinion, it's a pretty god awful literature.
It's amazing that God slept through all that.
Yeah. Anyway, and they say, well, don't read those parts. Just read the good parts.
Yeah.
And then I say, yeah, what the problem is our world leaders are the ones that read the bad parts. I mean, that's exclusively.
And they have
the Zionists are the ones that read the same passages in the Torah. It's okay.
Neocons.
Neocons.
And the fundamentalist Christians only read the most horrible parts of the Christian Bible as well.
Yeah.
And they have nukes, That includes Netanyahu, that includes Biden. Well, that's a scary concept altogether.
What are we to make of the near-term future? Alexander Mercurius yesterday was alleging that 2 more carrier groups are on their way, are being deployed. He was suggesting that makes 4 total in the Mediterranean. Now, I didn't get any confirmation of that. I tried to check the news to see if there were, in fact, two additional carrier groups. But we know of the 2 that are already headed to the Mediterranean. Assuming 2 more are on deployment. Like, can we see clearly that the U.S. is looking for a war with Iran, or is it bravado? Is it an attempt to warn Iran not to intervene if there is an invasion of Gaza? Like, Jeff, I want to hear your take on what the short-term future portends in Israel-Palestine.
Well, of course, we know Iran is funding the Houthis in Yemen. We know Iran is funding, Hezbollah in southern Iran. We know that the Iranians have forces in Iraq. We know that they're helping Syria. And so, I think Iran is like China. It really does not want to get into a hot war. I mean, they've got 80 million people. Their economy's suffering from all the sanctions. I think Iran would like to avoid a hot war right now. And this is so clearly, I mean, you can just see it in the headlines. Biden tells Netanyahu to hold off on the invasion, and the United States is going to help with the invasion. Palestine is the new Ukraine. The United States is using Ukraine to attack Russia, and the United States is using, well, Israel, if you want, to attack the Arab world. But basically, that's what it boils down to. You know, I think it would be an embarrassment for the West if Iran does get involved. I think what they'll try to do is try to keep feeding as much material to Hezbollah. Remember, Hezbollah has not gotten involved at all so far. Just some skirmishes. They took out a few tanks and
the equivalent of throwing a rock. Yeah, they really didn't.
Yeah. But Hezbollah is the 800-pound gorilla. They're the ones that have over 100,000 missiles. They're the ones that really, really scare Israel. They're the ones that kicked Israel's ass in 2006. I mean, Israel got its ass waxed in 2006 by Hezbollah.
Yep.
And now Hezbollah is much, much more powerful than it was. So I think, I mean, you know, in my sort of bravado, you know, I'd love to see, you know, Iran raining, you know, missiles down on, you know, Israeli airports and American bases, you know, occupying forces in Syria and in Iraq, but the people can't afford it. And all the United States would do would just, you know, rain missiles down. And of course, in Iran would try to avoid civilian casualties. The United States would be dropping bombs on downtown Tehran and Isfahan, and they don't give a shit. You know, they'll be bombing schools and hospitals. I mean, that's what we do. And so I think what's going to, you know, obviously the ground thing is going to work. They're going to pull it off. I was a little bit alarmed. I mean, I'm sure Hamas and Hezbollah must have thought about this, but I heard that that Israel was talking about flooding or pumping nerve gas into the tunnels of Hamas, and I don't know what that would do. I don't know if
it specifically said with U.S. Navy's administration or something like that. So it's not just us, you know.
Yeah, of course. And I think the 2 extra aircraft carrier units are so that the U.S. will be trying to take out as many Hezbollah, you know, missiles as possible. You know, apparently, I don't know if it's true or not, but they put an aircraft carrier unit over in the Persian Gulf that apparently had a good effect against the Houthis drones. I don't, you know, from bombing Saudi. That's supposed to be resolved, but it never seems to end. Saudi forces, you know, still occupying Yemen. So this is clearly another proxy war. The United States with France and England and Germany. Again, the only 2 countries in Europe that have any integrity and any sense of history and any sense of decency are Hungary and Serbia. And
1 person in Spain. Let me just add that, because that woman is a legend.
Yeah. You know, Orban and Vucic, and they're the only 2. The rest of France. I mean, I see the TV in France, and it's just like I just want to vomit. You know, listening to Macron and you know mini Macron, and so that's what I think Hezbollah will have to get involved. I mean, if they go in full force into Gaza, Hezbollah will go into will attack, you know, Israel. I think another very interesting one is Iraq and Syria attacking the illegal forces there. You know, the Iraqis a year and a half ago asked the Americans to leave. Of course, they're an occupying force. They're occupying the eastern third of Syria, and I saw a headline. General, you know, whatever his name, says that the United States has been attacked by
Self-defense.
Self-defense. 12 times in Syria, and 12 times. Was it 12 times in Iraq and 3 times in Syria? I don't know. That would be an interesting play, because of course Iran could flood across the border, all kinds of nastiness to cause the Americans, hell, in Iraq and in Syria. So interesting times, but there's clearly going to be a war, and just like in Ukraine, and to sit there and say, oh, this just happened. No, this started happening in 1917, and with the Balfour Declaration, and millions of people have been slaughtered and exterminated and ethnically cleansed over the generations. So that's my take. It's maybe not a brilliant answer, but
I agree on major points, but I'd like to sort of add a little bit of a wrinkle or my thinking. Anybody seen the new Economist cover, which is a British billionaires magazine, and the main story of it? It's America's test of might or something like that. America's supposed to show in the Middle East that it is mighty because most of the world doubts it. They see America in decline. So the Brits are very much cheering this on. But go back, not much, a couple of months, we had the BRICS, the Belt and Road Forum, right? Expanded to BRICS 11. It was going to include Saudi Arabia. It was going to include the UAE, right? And of course, China made that amazing diplomatic strike like this, ended the Yemen war. The Saudis were getting around with Iran. Earlier it was the Sunni crescent around the Wahhabis, and that turned into, I think, Scott Ritter described it as the cross of chaos. And it was diffused, The whole region was going into a peaceful reconciliation, and that's when the US and I'm not sure about this whole, what is it called now? 10/7, the 10/7 attack, right? Where it came from, Pied Piper versus real intelligence failure. I'm with a real intelligence failure, but the reaction was absolute panic. And now, all of that progress, that's what it seems lost, because the multipolar world is just marching around the border. And that means expulsion of the US's influence from many, many regions. And this was the region that they said, fuck Ukraine. We're not going to let this happen, because this is oil nation. This is oil central. And that's why, they're just moving ahead and ahead. It's signals, it's posturing. That's why we're going to get, did you say 4 carrier groups? How many does the US have?
That's a good question. I know there's 2 in the Mediterranean. Alexander Mercurius was saying that he heard yesterday morning that 2 more were being deployed, and he suspected they were going to go to that area of the world, but I couldn't get any independent confirmation of that. But that was something he said on his YouTube.
And yet the escalation always comes from the Western side. What I've heard from Iran, both at the UN level and at home, is don't. This could get out of control. Please don't fucking do this. And always from the other side, this thing. I agree with Jeff on that Iran, it's not in its interest. But it's not because it's poor and under sanctions. It's finally opening up to the world of the sanctions. It would be in a group with China, North Korea, Russia, who no longer give a toss about the sanctions, and it can start exporting. In the constitution, scientific is enshrined in Iran's constitution. Every year they have the equivalent amount of mathematicians and engineers as the United States has. You mentioned they had 80 million people, right? The US has 330 million. It's a highly advanced scientific. They built an automotive industry from the ground up. These are serious, sophisticated people that don't want this. But if America engages in this, I don't know if this is from Mercurius, but I agree, it's going to be a catastrophe for them. Of course, the rest of the world as well. But for the US, it's a catastrophe.
And just to add to your earlier point about what China is doing in the region, in the Western Asia region, besides the diplomatic inroads,
building,
besides the rapprochement that China was able to broker, that is going to create long-term stability and peace, or towards that. China is the first part of China's engagement with Iraq is building 1,000 schools. That's only the first part.
I recently watched someone travel through the country. Do you know where the most cranes, where the most construction is right now in West Asia? That is Afghanistan. And they didn't make it to a lot of international forums, but they were there at the Belt and Road Forum, man. That's
absolutely. And also,
lifting of status. And yeah,
absolute. And also, I just heard about this today. China has just completed the first high-speed rail in Western Asia, connecting, get this, Mecca and Medina.
or the two most holy places.
I mean, this is a seismic. This is epic. This is world historic for Islamic people of the Islamic faith all over the world. I mean, from Mecca to Medina. I mean, that's like world historic.
I guess the next step would have been to go to Al-Aqsa, and that couldn't happen. You know, that couldn't be allowed to happen.
Maybe
I do want to point out, I think the resolve of, I do want to go back to a little bit to Palestine. I can't, I'm looking for his email and I can't find it, just like Amir's book about the history of the Jewish people. And I apologize for not being better prepared. But anyway, he's a really cool guy. He's a Palestinian. He wrote a book about the cooperation between the hunger strikers in Ireland and the hunger strikers in Palestine. It was really interesting. There's
a lot of that graffiti still in Ireland. You might be aware of this.
Yeah. I'm sure there is. And he wrote he's from Palestine. He's a professor in Turkey. And anyway, he just sent an email, and unfortunately I'm muffing his name and I'm not spelling his name right.
Did you say it was Amir Khan? Was his name Amir Khan?
No, Amir's China Writers Group.
Okay, somebody else.
Anyway, he just said, I have lost 9 relatives in Gaza. 9. Enough is enough. And then just yesterday, and what I'm trying to find is, he said that the Palestinian people have decided that the era of ethnic cleansing is over, and he said that the Palestinian people have decided that there is no paradise in the Sinai. In other words, they're going to fight. They're going to fight, and this is it. They put up with this humiliation since 1917, and I think that there's going to be a lot of people killed. Thousands and thousands and thousands will be killed. But they killed 8 million. They killed 8 million North Koreans, and the Americans still lost. They killed 3 million Vietnamese, and they still lost. They killed millions of people all over the world, and the Americans have still continued to lose. And so, but I think it's going to be really, really, really bloody. I think I think there's going to be a lot of Palestinian martyrs, and I just, I think that, and let's just keep our fingers crossed that it turns out to be as big a disaster for the Americans as Ukraine is.
I think it will. Yeah. On your first comment, it's really heartbreaking. You can find what do you call when there's more than one message? Threads on X about the last messages of before people got martyred. And it's like full of, I don't care if I go to heaven, we will one day be free. It's like a testament to people's will. Absolutely amazing. And I downloaded, it was like a huge, many 100-page PDF, the latest, the Palestine Medical Association, something like that, the death report. The first 43 names were identical. That's like an extended family gone, absolutely gone. It's heartbreaking. But at the time when I left for my thing I had to do today, the last thing I saw was Douglas McGregor and Scott Ritter both mentioned that, I couldn't find this anywhere official at the time, that there was this little expeditionary force, like a little tasty bud thing, that the Israelis and the US sent into Gaza, into the bombarded region, and they were dead. And they were gone. So again, treat this as rumor, for scuttlebutt for the time being. But if that's true, that's fucking significant, because the news about, okay, we're going to delay, we're not going to sign the military order to actually commence with the invasion, that came out a couple of hours after this.
Maybe they're reading Ho Chi Minh's papers on the People's War.
Okay, absolutely, the Hamas. And I'm sure the Hezbollah fighters have been studying Viet Cong tactics
Mhm.
extensively over the years, not only in recent years, but yeah.
Which were of course influenced by Mao Zedong and the People's Army in
Absolutely,
China.
Mao
I
Zedong as
mean,
well.
yeah, Ho Chi
Absolutely.
Minh met
Ho Chi
Mao
Minh, yeah.
and lapped up everything Mao talked about as far as People's War, and so let's hope that that's what it turns into. And you know,
Yeah,
I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be a bloody one.
What
Yeah, I
about
mean,
the,
And I'm just going to drop one more name because Kim Il Sung did the same, you know, asymmetric warfare, and even the Japanese praised him. You know, when your enemies praise you, that
Who-
means you're someone. Kim Il Sung, the original.
Oh, Kim Il Sung. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
Maybe the pronunciation. Sorry.
yeah, he was another one, of course. Absolutely,
yeah, just
absolutely.
you know, I'm not an expert in military matters, but you know, from everything I'm reading and everything that I'm, you know, looking at, there's just no way that Israel and the U.S. are not going to get their asses thoroughly handed to them, diplomatically, militarily, just in terms of like everything on every angle.
Soft power is lost as well. I guess
Absolutely.
that's part of it's not part of diplomacy. Soft power is down the drain now. Nobody's going to
Down the
believe you that you're for human rights and democracy after this.
let me throw something out there. Let me throw an idea out there. I mean, assuming there's just the two carrier task forces, and they do start, you know, attacking Iran with missiles and planes. Iran, you know, might try and block the Straits of Hormuz, which 20% of the world's oil goes through there, and 25% of the world's natural gas goes through the Straits of Hormuz. So that would cause a global economic crisis, right? And so Iran's doctrine isn't really to project force and win an offensive war against another country. It's to hunker down, defend themselves, and and outlast whoever is trying to destroy them. So that's, you know, they can do that through attrition and through causing economic distress throughout the planet. But what if the U.S. wants that, right? What if the U.S. is looking for a global economic catastrophe as justification to then implement a wider war against China, against shipping lanes? You know, that kind of worries me. I've been thinking along those lines.
It's increasingly worrying me too, but there's one problem. Have you checked like a topographical map of Iran? It's like from every direction. It's just basically a fortress of mountains. You need to, I think, refuel your F-18 bomber jet twice just to get to Tehran from the fucking beach, and that American carrier is not on the beach. And Iran has the Fatah, the hypersonic missile, for which this is a sitting. Of course, the US is dominant air force. That has been their major motto for the last 20 years, since, you know, they've been killing shepherds. And
a lot of people don't know that Hezbollah, which apparently has thousands of kilometers of tunnels, and Iran, which has thousands of kilometers of tunnels. You know who they cooperated with to learn all that? North Korea.
DPRK, of course.
North Korea, DPRK, has been working for 20, 30 years with Iran and Hezbollah to teach them tunnel technology, because that's what the North Koreans had to do when the United States was literally rebombing rubble in the northern half of Korea, exterminating 8 million people. They had to dig tunnels and get as many people out of.
They leveled Pyongyang. It was like glass.
Yeah. So I think the question for Iran, and listen, man, I don't know if you all know who Ramin Mazaheri is, but
I don't.
You know, a wonderful journalist. His book about, you know, socialist Islamic Iran is just unbelievable. And I can tell you, if it means victory, millions of Iranians are ready to die. Millions are ready to die.
Just look
they
at
are
some.
ready to die. And so, go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just gonna say, just look at some of their. They have these. I forget the word now, like religious but singing leaders, and just the spirit you get when they. I think Haydar. That means lion, and it's all about. We're ready to be to sacrifice ourselves for Palestine, for the brotherly people there. The public opinion is, again, it's like Russia for 9 years. Putin kind of held back his people. Don't go in, don't go in. They wanted to go in. Iran is the same. Iran is holding back its people because they want to go in basically now. I had another thought, but
Would the U.S. want a military?
That happens.
yeah, oh yeah, you talked about one point of asymmetric warfare, the one the DPRK practices, the one that Hamas practice, underground insurrection. But everybody keeps forgetting that it's like 30 years since NATO's and the US's prime. And as I started saying, their mantra, their doctrinal response is Air Force, flatten everything, and then we go in with a few people, clean up. And Russia has been advancing since the 2000s in the absolute opposite direction. Is that your strategy? We're going to build the best air defense in the world. The S-400, now identified by Sergei Shoigu, shot down something like 24 jets in 5 days. And they absolutely say this outright, saying, you can try this. This is a meme, but it's a cute meme. Someone said, look, the A-10, and look at all the things that the A-10 killed. It's the tank killer Warthog aircraft that NATO has. And they sent somewhere into the region. And the meme was, what does the Air-10 pilot do when faced with real anti-aircraft missiles? One, die, because that is it. So, hypersonic missiles were built to cut through every defense that the US has. China has them, Iran has them, Russia has them, and it's proven it in Ukraine.
And the DPRK.
Yeah, they were saying, send in the newer tanks, send in you sent the Patriots, send in something newer. We want to test it against all of this because we can smash them to bits easily on the first week. It's absolutely been dismal for the image of the US, armed forces. If they really want to try this with Iran, that's where I think, that's asymmetric too. And they still think it's 1990, I think. Not the military leaders, not the Pentagon, but these, Blinkens, the Bidens, maybe the Nuland Kagans, they still think like that. And for them, this is the prize. We have to destroy Syria, get the Ruskies out, and we have to destroy Iran because it's the bad boy. But it's asymmetric.
So we have general agreement. There's not a military, a good military option for the West against Iran in the Middle East. I'm liable to believe that, but I'm worried that the U.S. has the capability to stand way off and to just destroy cities, destroy civilian infrastructure, and suffer relatively light consequences as a result. But I hope that's not true.
No, Russia and China are both standing by. The 6 warships from China are parked in the vicinity.
In Doha,
official Chinese statement says that they are there to escort some shipping or whatever, but
diplomatic mission.
Goodwill visit, something like that. Yeah. But that's diplomacy, yeah.
But they are ready and they're still standing by. And the Russian hypersonic missiles, the U.S. Military has no answer for.
Right. Well, I would point out neither Russia nor China has any kind of defensive pact with Iran. Like there's no agreement that if Iran is under attack, that Russia and China are going to defend them.
True, but look at the level of coordination. The United States has
stated that they're going to defend Israel. Right. The United States says they're going to defend Israel. They asked Britain and Germany and France to do the same.
Let's not forget.
Even Russia and China.
Go ahead, Ben.
I'll be quick. Even Russia and China, they never said we're allies. We are in this strategic partnership of the 21st century or something. Yeah. And they have been coordinating so deeply, it's like up to your eyeballs. And they've done the same diplomatically with Iran. Where did the foreign minister, Abdullahian, I think, fly? He flew to Moscow. That is the diplomatic heart now of the world. And he knows it because the UN has proved to be useless in this. But Jeff had a thought. I'm sorry, I just had to spit.
I just wanted to point out, but don't forget, Iran is now a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
And BRICS 11 from January 1. Yep.
And Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which includes China and Russia, was first set up as a military cooperative for military cooperation. Now it's a lot more. Now it's economic.
Oh, I thought it was just economic, like the EU once upon a time.
I think there's a military. They do cooperation together. They do exercises together. I think that Iran could sit there and say to China and Russia, hey, we're being attacked. We need your help. I don't think they would come out and openly do it, but they could sure provide them with a lot of material and equipment, which I'm sure that China and DPRK are already supplying arms to Russia. I think it's pretty obvious. Not heavy duty stuff, drones and stuff, but it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, thank God Russia and Iran did support Syria and did defend Syria militarily and Hezbollah. But again, that was against a proxy, right? That wasn't against the U.S. directly. So it'll be gamesmanship and brinksmanship, and it'll be very interesting the next couple of weeks to see how everything plays out. It seems like the U.S. has asked Israel, hold off. We're getting all of our assets in place, our anti-air, our carrier groups, and then go ahead. And to see how that plays out in the next couple of weeks will be momentous. It'll be something that we see, every century kind of thing.
Yeah, and the whole world diplomatically knows this is green lighting a genocide. They know it. It's obvious. Once that thing starts, all bets are off. I don't know what happens next. But I think the major... Sorry, you, Jeff, had made that wonderful thing, the 80-pound gorilla or something?
800-pound gorilla.
800-pound gorilla. I saw that somewhere, exactly the same phrasing, and it was about Turkey, because, the second largest standing army.
They're supporting Palestine.
And I've never seen Erdogan come out like this. There's what do you call them, domestic reasons for this, like splitting with Kemalism and going the Muslim path, especially for the generals. But it was serious. And I don't think it's he's mostly still what you would call a paper tiger. I mean, he's Iran, a quarter of Iran. When you come to the technology, the real force there. I still don't think Turkey's that big. It has a big standing army, but that's it.
And it's a member of NATO.
Yeah, and that's in question now by some Republican, I think senator or House representative hinted that they want to kick him. Well, good luck.
Another interesting thing is I got, I'll bring up two other points. I don't know how long your shows go, but I'll bring up a couple other points. Is that there apparently is not a lot of solidarity in the Israeli Defense Force. Most of these are young conscripts. They don't want to be there. It was A-okay, to shoot kids, who were throwing rocks at you, but it was not okay. But it's not okay to have Hamas with some serious firepower shooting back. And so I've been hearing that there's dissension in some of the ranks, and that was also another reason that Netanyahu was trying to maybe postpone things, was to try to reinforce the morale of the soldiers. I don't know how true that is. It's actually was something Godfrey Roberts put on the China Writers Group. The other thing is, I'm just, Israel has done an excellent job insinuating itself into the Arab world, and it's shocking to see a map of all the Arab countries that now have diplomatic relations with Israel. Morocco and Egypt and the Gulf states and. Did Saudi Arabia ever do? I don't think Saudi Arabia has not yet.
The BRICS thing would have, made peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and basically Biden's answer was, "Look, I'm going to give you all the stuff you want. Even they call it the civilian nuclear program, but I think we can guess what that would have been. We're going to give you all the good stuff, but you have to recognize Israel. That was the deal, and it's dead now." Yeah.
Well, the standouts. Tunisia is now talking about. I actually lived there for 2 years. Tunisia is now talking about passing a law, making it against the law to recognize Israel. Algeria is definitely in the revolutionary camp, but there's just too many other countries, that and I just wonder if it really spills over and goes into a hot war. Will they stop relations with Israel? I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of pressure on them from their people. Like the governments are pliable, puppets, Western puppets in a lot of those countries, but the actual populations of the country are definitely on the side of Palestine. Mm-hmm. So it puts these countries, these governments, in a very tough situation.
That's a really good point. Also, second point on this, that they can speak really tough in diplomacy. We've seen Qatar, not cancel the invitation of Joe Biden. Egypt has gone all out, brothers and sisters, but they have massive US bases on their soil.
Yeah.
That kind of nips any of that in the bud, in my opinion.
But those military bases are, I mean,
Jordan, the king of Jordan was very passionate, but he has the largest fucking base, US base. Yeah. Sorry, Leo. Go on.
No, I'm just saying, like, those military bases can be dismantled as well.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, that Russia cannot afford to lose Ukraine. China is not going to let Russia lose Ukraine. And I was just sitting there thinking how important Iran is to China for the Belt and Road Initiative and for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I'm just sitting there thinking, Russia and China are probably quietly saying the same thing. We can't let Iran lose.
No,
we cannot let them lose. I mean, then Americans would be, back on the Afghan border, very, 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 very close to the Chinese border, and on the border with, India and everybody else. And of course, India's in the SCO too.
Yeah. So, let's not talk about India. It always depresses me.
I know. It's a mess. But anyway, I think that, and China has been unusually forthright about supporting Palestine this last couple of weeks. I mean, they're coming out and basically they pissed the Israelis off. The Israelis are not happy with the Chinese because the Chinese are saying that this has been going on for 75 years. So, and it's because there's no two-state solution in sight.
And the Chinese administration are very careful. Are very they say everything like everything's in reality 10 times more stronger than what they say.
Yeah.
And any statements, any positions that they put forth is like very, very well thought out, and it has to be advantageous, not only ideologically or concerning like any other thing, but pragmatically. Right?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'll paraphrase it. But just so you know, China doesn't do this lightly. Once every 10 years, maybe. It's so serious. This was Premier Li Qiang. I'm not sure the pronunciation.
Li Keqiang.
Thank you, Li Qiang. And he had that much, just about 2 paragraphs. And it was a statement saying we support Iran, especially against foreign meddling in its internal affairs. It's a huge commitment from China. That is unusual from the foreign ministry. It was it. Yeah,
I don't think it's
bleeped in my radar. Yeah.
I don't think it's possible for the West to overthrow the government of Iran. I think they can do damage to the economy, to the infrastructure. They could probably kill millions of people, but they would need to occupy the country to get rid of the government. So that's not even a possibility. Like, the government's there. They know they can't get rid of the government, but the question is, are they going to do their best to push them back 20 years, economically, kind of thing?
Well, like Ben pointed out, you look at a map of Iran, it's like the Himalaya mountains, man.
Exactly. Look at the topography. And don't forget that ever since the Shah, they have been watching America closely. They've been very, very sanctioned, like more sanctioned than Russia at one point. And every plan they have made has been exactly in this direction. That's why most of these drone facilities, the hypersonic missiles, they're deep underground. You can't even reach them with bunker busters. They're proud of this. People who came up with some sort of new meshing of metals and concrete that has the most stopping power against these bunker busters, it came from Iran, that technology. They're not incompetent people. And it hugely, everybody thinks it's all about the Ayatollah. It isn't. It's very decentralized. There's these Basij councils everywhere around.
And the charity counts and the charity councils and
that's what I think. I think most people misunderstand what Iran is.
And Iran is first and foremost a very socialist country. It's extremely socialist.
They don't call themselves that, but in effect, just like Russia doesn't call itself that, they say not capitalism, but Islam. That's the official Iranian way. But it's highly more people focused than anything in Western Europe, say, even the Nordic welfare states.
The socialist project in Iran has deep roots. It has been derailed by U.S. proxy wars. The Iraq, the war between Iraq and Iran can be seen absolutely as a proxy war. Maybe the first one.
in '88.
Yeah, that massively derailed the socialist project. But even before then, the U.S. backed regime change operation, but those roots are strong as ever.
Yeah, Iran is, I put it like this, far more technological, of course, but it's like the people of Cuba. You know, you can land whatever you want on the shores of Cuba. Those people are going to be out in the streets within hours, and it's just going to dismantle whatever you send to them. Because
another country that knows people's war very, very well.
Yeah.
So
Okay, guys,
ultimately,
I have to go.
Go ahead. Okay. All right, Leo, thank you so much for joining us.
It's
See
been
you
great.
later.
We've been going a long time. I was going to make a final point about the ultimate. You don't have to wait for the optimism. Like there is ultimately the decline of the West and the rise of China, and the anti-imperialist bloc is what's that word? Inevitable.
Irreversible. Yeah.
It's irreversible, inevitable. I think anything the U.S. tries to do militarily to forestall that inevitability is going to just accelerate their own decline. So ultimately, I have no concern about how things are going to play out, but it's interesting to speculate about how things are going to actually how that actually does play out. So yeah, I don't want people to think that I'm pessimistic or that I'm worried that the West has any kind of cards to play against the changing shift from unipolarism to multipolarism, because that's just it's an inevitability.
I think it's a good. Well, go ahead and say something, Ben, and then I'd like to close it out.
Jeff, you will have the very last word on today's show, but I just wanted to add that there's 4 pillars of power that any country can practice. First is political. That's your alliances, the people who vouch for you at the UN. US has lost that. I mean, the Russian UN resolution, like 7 staunch allies of the US abstained, which has never, ever happened before. That's amazing. Second is ideological. I mean, we are the free market, the democracy, the human rights. That's gone. I mean, what else is there? There's military. And the fourth one is economic, but even that looks down the drain with the absolute increasing like trillions and trillions just to service the debt that the US has while everybody is selling US treasuries and buying gold. It looks like the end game, and the only thing Biden has he doesn't have a deck of cards. He has one card, military, and that is a sign of dire weakness. That's what I put at the end. Jeff, take it away.
Well, Ben and I live in Europe.
You're in Europe? I didn't.
I'm in France. I'm in Normandy. And Billy Bob, in Europe, we like to eat. And our cuisine is really good. Hungarian cuisine and French cuisine are really good. And it's 1945. It's 7:45 in the evening in Hungary and France. I think Ben and I are going to go have a wonderful, wonderful European meal in our own cuisines. And Billy Bob, I hope you can suffer through. American cuisine, because it's not the same thing.
Throw that in my face, Jeff, as you leave. Shame on you, sir.
Damn.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Just based on accent, I thought Leo and I were the smoking European team, and you were the American team.
No, I live in Normandy, Cherbourg.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Jeff, thanks for giving us so much of your time. It's an honor to be with you and to have this discussion with you. So I thank you so much, Ben. I'm glad you were able to make it a little belatedly. We'll be back on Tuesday. We have some more big names on Tuesday. We got Larry Johnson and Max. What's Max's last name?
Blumenthal? maybe?
No, your friend Max. Your friend Jeff. Your friend Max. Shoot, his name escapes
Oh,
me.
Max Perry.
Yes, thank you. So Max Perry and Larry Johnson on
Wow.
Tuesday's program. So I'm excited about that. But no, Jeff, thank you so much. We will hopefully have you back.
I'll be back on, and I'm so happy to meet Ben. And of course,
Nice to
Billy.
meet you halfway through.
Yeah, well, we're not very far away from each other. We're
No,
Hungary and France is a high-speed train ride away.
true.
And well, maybe a connection or two, but we're not very far. And
you could literally meet for dinner.
well, a little bit late now. We could meet for breakfast tomorrow morning in Budapest.
True.
All right. And anyway, so good to see you, Billy Bob, and China Writers Group member, and of course Leo Zhou is one of my. I've interviewed him like 3 times or something. He's been on my show like 3. The guy's brilliant, and I wish he'd write more. But anyway, he's just brilliant. So honored and humbled to be here tonight. I apologize for my laryngitis. I apologize for coughing. I was looking for a button to mute myself, and I couldn't find how to do it. I don't know if you can do it in Stream or in
Yeah, in the bottom there's the controls. The left one is mute.
Yeah, your picture in the bottom. There's those 3 dots. I think.
For me, the left hand.
But I didn't even notice, Jeff. I did not even notice.
Doesn't matter.
Next time I will use the mute button if I'm hacking. All right, thanks guys.
Bye, Jeff. Thank you so much.
I'm going to go ahead and enjoy some nice Cabernet Sauvignon and have a nice meal.
Okay. All
right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.